to City on a Hill Kids Church Online.
I'm Moa.
And I'm Jimmy. Today we're going to talk about how David had faith in God.
That will be after a time of worship.
Goliath was a mostly mean, big and burly Philistine. He wore armor everywhere and fighting was his thing. David was an Israelite, a shepherd boy who did what's right. He offered to defend the land with pebbles and a sling. On the chosen battle day, they met on an open plain. Goliath mocked his enemy and viewed him with disdain. David was so small and still, fearless he refused to yield. For faith was David's sword that day, and courage was his shield. Oh, David looked like a giant underdog, but it was really Goliath who didn't have a shot. Though he came to the battle with a spear and a sword, David came in the name of the Lord. David spun his sling around, boldly fired a rock he found. It sunk into Goliath's head and sent him to the ground. God is with us all our lives. He will be our constant guide, and nothing is impossible when God is on our side. Oh, nothing is impossible when God is on our side. Though he came to the battle with a spear and a sword, David came in the name of the Lord.
I'm going to tell one of the most popular stories from the Bible. It's David and Goliath. Now, the Philistines had gathered in a town in Judah. That is, a town that belonged to the Israelites. They were on a hill on one side, while the Israelites were on a hill on the opposite sides. So they were facing each other, and there was a valley in between. A giant man who was over 9 feet tall, named Goliath, was a member of the Philistine camp. He would come out every day to taunt the Israelites. He was huge, and his weapons were huge. For 40 days, morning and evening, he would taunt the Israelis and say, "What are you doing over there? Lined up for battle, eh? I am a Philistine, and you are slaves of Saul." And he would challenge the Israelites to a duel. He would say, "Choose a man amongst yourselves. Choose someone to come and fight me. And if he wins, then we will be your slaves. But if I win, then you will be our slaves." And when the Israelites would hear this, they would be terrified and would run away. Now, this is where David comes in. Now, remember, David used to play the harp to calm Saul down, but he still used to go and look after his father's sheep. His father, Jesse, was getting old. David's 3 eldest brothers had gone off to battle with Saul. So Jesse asked David to go to the battlefield, taking some food, and then going to check on his brothers to make sure that they were okay. Well, just to see how they were getting along. And that he should bring back word with proof that they were getting along well. So the next day, quite early in the morning, David got up, left the sheep with someone, and went off to the battlefield. When he got there, he gave the food to an officer and then went off to the battlefront to go and check on his brothers. So while he was speaking to his brothers, that's when he heard Goliath saying all the things that he had to say. He couldn't believe it. He heard all the taunting, and he could see how terrified the Israelite army was. He also heard the soldiers in the army saying that King Saul, had promised lots of things to whoever it was that would defeat Goliath. So David asked the soldiers again so that he could hear properly what was being said. What was it that King Saul was going to give to the person who defeated this heathen Philistine who was defying the army of God? And they told him, and they also told Saul what David had said, because, he was quite bold. So Saul sent for David, and David said, "Your Majesty, no one should be afraid of this heathen Philistine, that I will defeat him." And Saul said, "No way, you are just a youth, and Goliath has been fighting since he was a youth." And David said that, "Look, I look after my father's sheep, and when a bear or a lion comes and takes a lamb, that I will go and I would rescue the lamb from out of the mouth of the lion or the bear. And if the lion or bear turns on me, that I would grab it by the throat and beat it up." David said that he would do the same thing to this heathen Philistine that dares defy the armies of the Lord God Almighty. And that the Lord who saved him from the paws of the lion and the bear would also save him from this Philistine. And then Saul agreed, because nobody else came up to offer to the challenge that Goliath was giving. So Saul put his entire armor onto David. And then David tried to walk. He tried to walk and it wasn't working. And he said, "King Saul, no, I can't wear this." So he took off the armor. And then he went to the stream, to the brook, and picked up 5 smooth stones. He put them into his pouch. He picked up his stick and went along with his slingshot off to meet Goliath. So while he was approaching Goliath and his armor bearer moved towards David. And Goliath could not believe it. What? Is it this good-looking boy that they had sent to fight him? Anyway, he now shouted to David and asked David, What's that stick for? Am I a dog? And he shouted many nasty things at David, and ended up saying that David should come here and that he, Goliath, would feed him to the birds and to the animals. So David responded, "You come at me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come at you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the Israelite army. And today he is going to put you in my power, and I will defeat you. And when this happens, the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. He doesn't need swords and spears to save his people. He is victorious in battle, and he will put you Philistines under our power." So Goliath now started walking towards David, and David ran. He quickly took a stone out, put it in his slingshot, and swung it at Goliath. And it hit Goliath smack in the head, and Goliath fell down. And when the Philistines saw that their champion was down, they turned around and they ran. And the Israelite army now chased them. That was an interesting story, wasn't it? You can read more about David and Goliath in 1 Samuel. Now, David had complete faith that God was going to save him. He said that the God that saved him from the paws of the lion and the bear would certainly save him here. So he had faith, and you will always be successful when you have faith in God. And that's the end of the story.
Hi everybody, how are you doing today? Wow, that must be one of the most famous Bible stories ever, isn't it? And look, I've made myself this little shepherd's bag, and on it, it says, "The battle is the Lord's," on my 5 smooth stones. And this doesn't look like much, does it? It didn't look like David had much in his hand, but that didn't matter, because in his heart, he had God. So he knew that he could trust God. He knew that God can handle it. He knew God is bigger. So it doesn't matter what we have in our hand. What matters is who we have with us. And that is the Lord, isn't it? So how about we make one of these little shepherd's bags? So for this, what I've used is an old envelope because it's the right sort of colour. So it saves me colouring it in. If you wanted to, you could use white paper and then you just need to get it the colour you want. So first of all, I'm going to draw the bag shape, onto the envelope. There we go. So a sort of shape that I think this fabric bag would be. And then I'll cut that out. And I'm not cutting the bottom so that at the bottom, it's still attached together. You'll see what I mean in a minute. That's one side. So here we've got the 2 bits of my bag, and it's got this white label on. I don't want that, but that's okay. I'm going to fold it in half so it's inside out. Right, now I've got my bag shape. What I need to do next is make holes to weave the string through, because if you're working with leather, which this bag would be, or in our case, paper, it's much easier to make the holes first. So what I've got here is a needle, and I'm poking it through. So you want to be a bit careful with this. And I'm putting holes down each side, and I'm making them, I don't know, about 2 centimetres apart. So I've made these little holes, but they're a bit too small to get the string through. So now what I've got is this is a wooden kebab stick, but you could use something like a pencil. and I'm going back through where I already made the holes with the needle, because the needle was sharp enough to poke through in the first place, and then this is making all the holes big enough for my string, or you could use wool. There we go. So here's my bag with holes all around it. Next I'm going to take some string, and I've just got plain white string because I think it looks a bit more rustic, a bit more the right colour. And again, I'm going to use my kebab stick to poke the string through the holes. And I'm starting in one of the bottom ones, and then I just go through one side and then, oops, poke it back through the other side. And then through one side, again, and I've left this as a whole ball of wool. I haven't cut it off yet because I'm not sure exactly how long I need my string. And then we'll go back through the other side, and we'll keep going right round until we've got the whole bag, oops, woven together or sewn together. So go up one side. When you get to the top, what you want to do is leave a loop like this, and then start coming down the other side. Look, here's one I've nearly finished. So I've been weaving up one side and then coming down the other side, and I've just got one more left to poke through. There we go. And now, to stop the thread just pulling out, I'm going to finish it with a knot. So if you just tie a normal knot in the thread, but then what you want to do, so that it ends up next to the paper, because you don't want the knot to come all the way along here, you want next to the paper, just hold the knot down and pull the string tight. And then we'll do another one just to make sure it's big enough to stop the wool, I keep saying wool, the string going back through the paper. We'll cut off that end, and then we'll do the same here. Just tie a knot. We'll push the knot down to the paper, pull it tight, and do a second one. Push it down to the paper, pull it tight. There we go. So here we've got our bag ready. Now the next thing we're going to do is make our stones, and you should have plenty of your brown envelope left. So what I'm going to do is just draw 5 stones. I'm going to make them quite round. They were smooth stones, do you remember? They're not lumpy bumpy stones. They're really nice smooth ones. And we'll cut these out, and I'm going to get 2 for each bit I'm cutting because they're made of an envelope, so they're double. So there's 2. And cut out, keep cutting until you've got 5. And then what we want to do is we're going to colour them in. And so I've got some, I've chosen blue, grey, brown and white because I think those are stony colours. And I'm just going to use some different colours in different places on different stones. There we are, until I've got 5 all coloured in. Now, the good thing about the fact it's 5 stones is it fits our key words. The battle is the Lord's. So let's write those onto the stones. The battle is the Lord's. Remember, Lord, L-O-R-D apostrophe S. The battle belongs to God. So once you've got your stones ready, you have a choice. Either you can do what I've done and stick them onto the front of your bag, or if you wanted, you could just pop them inside the bag. But I quite like having them outside. I realised David had them inside the bag. He reached in and got a stone. But because they've got our key message on, I like putting these on the outside to remind us that all he had was stones. It's not much, is it? Stones and, of course, his sling. But the important thing is he had the Lord. So inside our bag, the final thing we're going to do is we're going to write ourselves some messages that we're going to slip inside that are going to remind us it doesn't matter if all we've got is a little bag, but we have God. So using a bit more of your envelope, just cut out some strips and write yourself some little notes. God is bigger. God can handle it. And we'll pop these in our bag. And anytime you're facing something hard, anytime you've got a tough day coming up, trust God, you can just put your hand in your bag and draw one of these out. And it will remind you of David's story and of how, with God, you can do anything. So, I hope you enjoy making a shepherd's bag, and I hope it helps to remind you how, with God, it doesn't matter how little you have or how big the problem is, because you've got God and He's bigger. Right, well, I will see you again for another David Craft next week. Bye!
David and Goliath. That is such a famous story. I'm sure lots of people don't even know where it comes from. That is, lots of people don't even know it comes from the Bible.
I'm sure you're right, Jamie. I mean, on the news, I've heard them talk about David and Goliath when they were talking about a war that's happening right now. Anyways, back to this story. David was not happy with all the things Goliath was saying about the Israelite army.
He wasn't. He didn't think twice about whether he was going to get defeated by Goliath or not. That was the furthest thing from his mind.
Yes. All he thought about was how the battle wasn't his, but God's. God was just going to use him to defeat Goliath and his army, just to show the world that Israel has a great God.
By the way, that's our God too. David really put all of his trust in God. He had so much faith in God. I wish I could practice that much faith in God as well.
Me too. What about you guys? That's it for this week.
Till next time,
Bye.